for joining us today. I have the pleasure of being joined by two very special speakers, two very unique speakers in what they do, and excited to share that with you and share kind of the context of why we're here today and what we're going to be talking about. And that is that coming up in November 1st and 2nd, we are going to be hosting the Therapeutic Interventions for Frontline Service Members freebie. And what that is it is a training dedicated to our frontline service members. So whether you think of military personnel, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, other individuals that work on the front line, it is going to be a training dedicated to those individuals, understanding the unique rehab needs for those professionals. And today with me, I have the two speakers that'll be presenting that training. I have Layman and Darrell Locket joining me, and they're going to be jumping in and going over some questions that we have to kind of give you a sneak peek of what this training is all about. Frank, Darrell, thank you for joining me today.
Hey,
thank you.
I appreciate it.
So we will go ahead and jump right into some questions here. The first question that I have, and Darrell, I'm going to push this one over to you, is okay. Why are tactical athletes rehabilitation needs so unique from the general population?
Well, first of all, those guys are very unique in what they do. We have to be ready for combat in a sense of any aspect can happen from the war that's taking place in Israel today, but we have to be capable of defending ourselves as Americans. So we have to prepare these guys in every aspect to be able to deploy at any time, having the unique qualities of physical fitness, mental toughness, the ability to handle stress in any situation, and be physically fit. Most of our guys in the rehab and the military environment are dealing with the upper cross, lower cross syndrome. So it's very imperative that we focus on corrective exercises day one. It's not about strength training. It's about correcting these faulty movement patterns. It's about correcting these patterns that they have developed over the time based on how they sit, in the same sense of tight hip flexors, weak glutes, forward neck, in the sense of computer work, or with me working with pilots, in which pilots always pulling G's have a lot of effect with thoracic and cervical problems that we need to address. So it's a totally different environment when you're dealing with military personnel because of the fact that they have to be ready. So it's not like the traditional athlete or the traditional general population. They have to be physically fit on a continuous basis. There's no off season for them. So we got to prepare them for any situation because it may come immediately. So being ready for that is why we're really looking at the rehab within inside of them, so we can maintain the injury aspect, but also prepare them for battle, and that's on the battlefield. And so it's a unique population in so many areas of conditioning, not only conditioning, but also cardiovascular and stress management in the same sense. Because not only they're military personnel or tactical athletes, but they have to deal with family perspective too. So there's a mental perspective of this, a physical perspective of this, and a stress perspective that we need to deal with other than the general population. Frank, you may add to that. Frank could add to that.
Yeah, no, I thought that was well said. The only thing I was going to say is readiness. You've got to be ready. And whether they're military personnel or firefighters or police officers or EMT, we know that's imperative. So on our side of it, if we could do more for like screening, like Darrell alluded to by the upper and lower cross, the postural stresses, if we could be more in tune with prevention, as well as strong rehabilitation to make sure it's individualized to fit these guys' special needs. That's all I would add. I thought that was well said, though, Darrell. Thank you.
Let me put one more thing too. This is how it goes, guys. If I have two high school guys, one wants to play for the University of Alabama, the other one wants to be a Marine. Both of these guys are firemen or police officers. Both of these guys are 150 pounds. Now, when that football player goes to the University of Alabama, we're going to put some muscle on him, right? And we're going to give him a football. But the Marine, what we're going to do, we need to put some muscle on him, but we're going to give him an M4, to fight battles. So this guy, we need to make sure our military is healthier, right? Be able to perform on a given level, be able to be cognitively aware of the situation. Even I put guys through a strenuous workout, get their heart rate up to 80, 90%. Now I sit you in front of an iPad and say, make a decision. That's
Yeah.
how the war situation goes, especially with my guys. And being those jets where they may have to sit in the jet for an hour before they get to the actual battlefield. So we need to focus on that cognitive ability, but also that physical ability in both sense. So one does not weigh out the other.
I know
That's
sitting in the
perfect.
back of those military vehicles like the old Deuce and a Half or the LMTV, man, then you got to get out and you got to perform. You have to move. You have to move under duress. It's different. It's a lot of it's it's a different perspective, and you don't necessarily have to have done it to have an appreciation of it. I think that's where you have to spend a lot of time really getting to know these guys and what they really do and the stresses they have to perform under.
I really like that both of you touched on, and it seemed like a common theme in your answers was, that kind of when you think of the whole biopsychosocial impact of what these individuals do on a daily basis, it's you have the physical side of it, but then also you have the cognitive side, as Darrell mentioned. Then you also have the emotional, the mental, the family aspect. There's so many different components that these individuals deal with on a daily basis that it kind of takes you out of that just strictly biomedical model. It has to make you think of other things, which you both touched on there. And I really like that you both touched on it. Something I'm excited to learn more about in the event in November.
And for some of these guys, like Darrell saying, it's not like a regular athlete. There's no off season. There's not much recovery time. So it really, you need to mitigate risk. I said to understand the risk is a big thing too. And the conditions we operate under, I can tell you many times, dehydration is a big factor we don't talk enough about.
That is correct.
I would love to, now that we've kind of jumped into that topic of dehydration, I would love to kind of, dig a little bit deeper there and talk more about that as being an, effect and how we can turn the switch on that, right? And change that and how we're approaching, rehab from respect to dehydration. And then even kind of when you think of, prehab as a precursor to rehab and going into that route, right? A lot of the preventative side of things. If you could both touch on that, that'd be great.
Well, let me go with this here. On the hydration aspect, now my pilots, you would remember pilots in the plane, basically we take, just like we do athletes, a wait before and after to see how much water loss they have sustained through that flight. That is the same perspective for boots on the ground to a fireman to the police officer. We have to do that in order to identify who is hydrated and who is not. And that is the best way that I do it. Just same thing, because they're athletes. And so treat them the same way that we treat athletes. When you hit the field, before you hit the field, you take your body weight. And after we take your body weight again, it's the same scenario to see how much water loss from basic on their body perception of that strenuous event or flight. And that's what I do.
Yeah, I've been in the Army 24 years before I got into the clinical side, just, as a trainer. And I can tell you, I've seen the evolution. That's what knowledge does. It changes behavior. So more and more you're hearing hydration reminders for people to hydrate because it sneaks up on them. The Camelbacks really helped out a lot to help offset some of it, but it's still prevalent and we know it exists. And then so that can increase, if you look at the studies, that can increase the risk of musculoskeletal injuries. So, awareness, understanding, and some kind of good programming to put in place. And Darrell, sounds like you've done a great job with that.
The next question I have for you both, and Frank, I believe you touched on this momentarily when you talked about being heavily individualized, as far as rehab programs for these individuals. And what I wanted to ask, is when you think of developing task readiness, whether it's in the military environment or if it's police officers, firefighters, how much thought goes into those individuals' specific environments in terms of rehab and increasing readiness for these individuals?
Yeah. So when we're developing that readiness, you have to understand in the Army, it would be their MOS. You have to understand what their job is and beyond their job. It's so interesting. I always like to tell people the appreciation of this. What does the Army band do when they're not playing? They guard the rear. Everybody has to be a soldier first and foremost, but not everybody's the tip of the spear like what Darrell's working with. But still, we need to mitigate the risk of injury, and we have to stay ready. So you need to understand what their MOS is, and there's information out there that can be provided, just like if you were looking at somebody's occupation. What are the occupational hazards? What are their lifting capabilities? What do they need to do? And then understanding like the new ACFT, which we've seen more injuries within the Army, going away from the Army physical fitness test. It's so demanding. So what are some of and maybe not enough data is out there yet for that, but we'll talk about that in class, that there are trend analysis. What are some of the common injuries for these MOS or a firefighter? Like right now, I have a chief versus somebody who's actually on the front lines of that. Those are two different approaches. So again, I think as you interview that person, you want to take that time to really understand the job duties they have to do and those that provoke their signs and symptoms. If it is a rehab case, if it's not and it's a screen, you want to stay ahead of that, like Darrell was talking about, and go, all right, what can we do to fortify this individual so that they're less likely to see a career-ending injury?
Let's deal on this point here. In July, they had a airman's conference at Eglin. Okay, pilots, as Americans, we spend $35 million just to train one fighter pilot. Okay, guys, $35 million just to train one fighter pilot. Now, that fighter pilot sustained neck and back pain. Where did that come from? Check this out. China stole our plans for the F-16. China noticed that their pilots were sustaining cervical and thoracic pain. So China implementing programs, what we're doing today, optimizing humans' weapon system. Okay? China sent their pilots to a 1-month retreat. Besides, they leave in order to treat them. And I've worked with the Chinese wrestling team. They are very, very particular. So you may go see a guy laying on a table with needles all over his body. You have Grashar or Grafton or instrument assisted soft tissue mobilization. He's all, hematoma up in a sense. But, for us, we looked at, they stole the F-35, F-16 plans. We pretty much stole their program. So that's how we implemented, how we have been implemented as physical therapists, athletic trainers, massage therapists into this holistic approach. It's called a holistic approach now. It's not looking at the whole body, every aspect of this body, right? The mental aspect, the physical aspect, but also how's the fascial drag. I'm as a massage therapist, a strength coach, and an athletic trainer, I do all entities. So I may have a guy and say, stand up straight, right? And I'm standing up straight. What are you talking about, Darrell? I'm standing up straight. But you could see the fascial pull. You can see my guys pulling on the G stick. Their right shoulder's up. They're gonna have neck pain on the left side. They're developing these problems, and we need to be right with our adversaries. If the adversaries are doing it, we need to do it, and that is what I'm finding out. Not only in my practice with seeing these guys every day, but it's out there. It's out there in the literature, and they're presenting this in China. So we have to turn this thing around for our military personnel. Instead of when you retire, we give you 3,000 for your neck, 5,000 for your back, 6,000 for your knee. That's why it needs to be a preventative perspective and have athletic trainers, massage therapists, physical therapists right there with them. I'm actually in a unique situation. I'm right there in the unit. So every day the guys pass right by me. So they don't have to go across campus or go off campus. I'm right there in house. So for their needs, even if they go out and play basketball or baseball or basketball with their kids and their shoulder have a little inflammation, right? They'll still come and see me. And so be able to do their sorties, in which cost, if they miss, you're talking about probably $500,000 that is lost because of that. So I'm saving the government money, but also giving these guys the quality of life and the confidence they need, because they're all Top Gun guys and they're cocky. Yeah, they're cocky and they're competitive, just like an athlete, right? They want to win. They go do BFMs and dog fighting and things of that nature. So they want to fly upside down and drop bombs in the same sense. Yeah. So it's
Yeah,
ironic that we're stealing each other's secrets, right?
Mhm.
Trying to steal our secret, we steal their secrets, but we need to emphasize we have the best fighting team in the world. Our U.S. military is the best in the world. We need the healthiest fighting team in the world. That's what we're trying to do. That's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, those are awesome points. If you look at elite athletes like in the world of mixed martial arts or tennis or any of those areas or the Olympic teams, they know this is important. So that access to that kind of care when it's small before it blossoms into something that's then needs surgery or rehabilitation, uh,
Hmm.
those are things that we really need to work even harder to implement, even though there are costs. Like you said, ultimately it's cost savings.
That is correct.
One question I wanted to ask the both of you, and I think when we think of impaired posture or faulty biomechanics, right, that occur over time. Sometimes in these populations, we see that as a result from, some of the PPE they wear, right? Different individuals, especially military, police officers, firefighters, they all have very different PPE or gear that they're
Hmm.
constantly carrying and what that looks like. And oftentimes that can affect, posture and having that load on them over time. So how much, in what you both do, clinically and through your assessments, does that play into, analyzing their movement performance and understanding, what they're wearing on a constant basis?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely want to see them with their gear on and their actual gear and what they're doing. Again, it's going to vary across the board. With police officers, it's a lower hanging belt, and there's more stress on the lumbar spine. And you can look at the research, and there's plenty out there. We'll present some on November 1st or 2nd and talk about those loads. Same with firefighters and their military. But it helps if you know exactly what their unit requires, what their MOS requires, and you have them and you watch them move in it. So I do think that's important. To me, that's usually I'm doing that toward phase 2 or 3, and there's
Hmm.
probably going to be line of duty and restrictions in their activity if it's that bad that we have to look at something like that. But yeah, you cannot get away from the fact that again there are occupational hazards, and the wearing of these this equipment is going to be a factor. It's going to increase a compressive load. It's going to change the
Correct.
biomechanics.
And so the total focus from that, and see any population I deal with, it from the fireman to the police officer to my pilots, right? It's all about the basic support, the feet. How's the feet? Are you pronated or supinated? That is going to matter. Their center of gravity, whether their pelvis, right? Whether anterior tilt, posterior tilt, tight hip flexors, weak glutes, right? That core strength is major, and the cervical spine, all proprioceptive feedback. Now with my guys, cervical spine is a big key because they put a helmet on that is 9 pounds, but pulling G's is 90 pounds. That's a huge difference on the neck. And now you got a guy in a jet dogfighting, trying to look at his six with a 90-pound helmet on. So it's critical. One of the things they teach my guys is to let off the G's before turning. Who's going to do that? I'm trying to be competitive. You tell me.
Yeah.
Right? So now these guys, the thing that I've learned about these guys through my period of time here, right? They go through, and it's totally different than an athlete. They go through class, they do the sims, and they throw them right into BFM, dogfighting. That's your first flight. So you can have the possibility of rupturing or causing a lesion, a musculoskeletal lesion. By that, if you don't have any thoracic mobility with that turn here, and some of these guys being kyphotic does not have that thoracic ability. And that thoracic ability helps with the cervical spine, and that's what I'm finding out. So we got to create that mobility with anyone. If I've got a backpack on, if I'm carrying a tank, right, for a fireman, if I'm carrying a hose, they have to have that core stability, and not only to flex, because these muscles are gravitational muscles. The posterior chain is gravitational, and I focus on what? Phasic and tonic muscles. That is always the key to any population. And we see it. We see a stroke patient with a stroke patient. Guys, right? So these muscles, that's why as a strength coach, I don't take my guys in. My guys been pulling G's or anyone going forward. And the first thing we do is bench press. That's the first thing a guy want to do is bench press. That is defeating the purpose, right? We need to work your posterior chain so you can be able to maintain those postural loads from whatever you put on. So the base of your feet has to be able to maintain. You tell me you get attack. You get attack in the bottom of your foot and start walking. You don't think that's going to mess with your cervical spine? You don't think it's going to throw off your hip? Right? And so think about your vision. If your vision is have some default in it, you don't think you'll be able to turn your thoracic spine incorrectly, right? Or my core is weak, right? And be able to stabilize. Because my guys, this was one thing with pulling G's is called, for D lock prevents G lock. G lock is when you pass out. So they got to bear down when pulling G's, right? So to keep that blood flow from going into their major organs instead of in their legs when they're pulling G's. And that has an effect on my standpoint. Now I can imagine when in the military carrying these packs have to hike for 10 miles, 5 miles, what the impact it has on their feet, their core, and their neck. So I address those aspects with anyone that I see, because we need to stabilize our feet. We need to make sure our core, 80% of movement comes from your core. So the core has to be engaged. We're going to engage your core. So I'm not looking to, strength training comes after corrective exercises. We're going to correct things, then move forward from there. We're not just going to put muscle on top of muscle to correct faulty movement patterns, especially when you are fighting against what? Gravity. Doesn't make sense. If I got packs on, I got boots on, it doesn't make sense to put them on a strength training program before we correct these musculoskeletal imbalances. And that's what I'm all about, because that's all you're going to see is imbalances and how we're going to address them, right? There's no diagnosis on that from a physician standpoint, but they have pain. So in the same sense, we need to correct. It is not about the pain itself. It's about the cause of that pain. Where's the cause? And that's in my career, that's what I'm focused on. What is the source of that pain? Is the source the backpack? Is the source of those shoes? Is the source of your core being weak? So we have to emphasize the whole body, the base support, center of gravity, cervical spine for anyone. And that's the philosophy based on Jada's approach to musculoskeletal imbalances, based on the upper cross, lower cross syndrome. And I follow that as my Bible. Yeah.
Love it. Love it. And The last question I have here for you before we wrap this up, because I don't want to give away too many sneak peeks, right? We have a lot of great content coming out, for this event, the beginning of November 1st and 2nd. So we hope to see you all there. But the last question I have for you both is, for someone who maybe doesn't work with this clientele every day or isn't as close to this patient population as you both may be, but they want to take on these skill sets, and then they want to know, where do I start? How do I reach this population? How do I get them into my clinical setting to work with them? What would be a tip that you would offer those individuals?
I'd say dive in the deep end, and you got to be prepared. This is a different population, so maybe be a little more direct. You cannot be have gray areas. You need to have it black and white. You want to respect them and what they do in their time, but don't be intimidated, because at the end of the day, these men and women, they're service oriented just like we are, and they're going to respond to that. But get to know what they really do, and try not to create a cookie cutter, but try to do something for them that's meaningful. And Darrell put it really well. What are the drivers of pain? Make sure you're thinking global and not to one point. Know that this is multifaceted, and you really need to have a good understanding of the whole body.
On a standpoint, man, first of all, to be able to get in with this population, that's the first thing, and getting approved to be a contractor with the government. That is one. I have the pleasure of working with Tostitos and Brian Connors, where he actually secure contracts. And that's what they're looking for, to secure contracts. So, I've heard that over one company contact me and say they're hiring over 300 athletic trainers for the Army itself, right? Within the next 2 to 3 years, because it's so imperative that we attack these individuals on a prehab perspective, right? Because I mentioned that, after the military knows you're going to be broken down afterwards. See, we need to get away from that. Right? I want you bigger, faster, stronger when you leave. Okay? You spent 25, 30 years in the military and you broke down. What? You gave all this to your country and you broke down. You're supposed to be healthier, in better shape, and more cognitive aware of your environment, your situation, and how you're going to go through this life. Instead of now, you're going to give me this for my neck, this for my back, my knee. We need to understand that the get in is being able to secure contracts, for one, and knowing what you're doing. We just renewed our contract here because they found out how beneficial it is. Because I've saved guys I saved money because of sorties not missed, right? And that is the key. We want to make sure our guys, and the key is that I'm right there with them. That just like an athletic trainer, just like Tom Brady has one, that's right there with him. Just like the Jets, the Los Angeles Lakers, or the Atlanta Braves. Their trainer is right there. When they go on TDY, guess who's there? I'm there. Because most injuries occurs on TDYs. That's a given fact, right? Because I've seen guys come back and they've broken down because of the fact. So we need to address that. And we're playing the right song at this time. You guys hear? You know where I'm at. And so my whole dedication is to these guys. I live with them. I eat with them. You know what I mean? So I know how they think, how they breathe. And I'm with these top gun guys. So they're very cocky. They're very cocky and confident, right? And incompetent in what they do. Because they're driving missiles. And so they're very aware of what their body needs on a daily basis. So be able to educate them first of all, foremost. And that's the whole thing. They ask so many questions because the physician see them for 5 minutes and you're done. No, man, I'm gonna bring out the iPad. This is your muscle. This is what's affecting your muscle. This is how it works. It's a kinetic chain. It goes from your back to your foot and how you walk. So emphasizing that whole perspective to them. And it's all about that education. It's all about that education.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for taking time to come on here and chat all these great topics, and we're going to go into so much more depth on November 1st and 2nd at our event, Therapeutic Interventions for Frontline Service Members. So excited to have you both at our studio in Wisconsin to be shooting this live for all of our attendees. Thank you again, for all you're doing for our country to help those that serve us, and for also serving, because Frank, I know that you continue to serve for our country, so we appreciate that as well. But again, thank you for joining me today, and so excited to see this training November 1st and 2nd.
Appreciate the support and looking forward to it. I can't wait to hear Darrell. I'm excited about his perspective, and I'm glad to share mine.
Yeah, I've been in so much in athletics, and I treat these guys like athletes, and they are. And high-powered, ready to go. I mean, we're preparing for our adversaries, and we will be ready. But also, I want to say this: we need to get Congress involved and understand that, right? So we can treat these guys appropriately, just like the high-power football player, right? That Tom Brady that's getting what? These guys are getting $50-60 million on the football field. But who's going to protect my mom? Who's going to protect my dad, right? Who's going to protect my freedom? So I'm happy to be able to be a part of this, but also happy to share the knowledge that I've learned from being around this community.
Perfect. Thank you so much, gentlemen. Look forward to seeing you both on November 1st and 2nd.
Can't wait.
Sounds good to me.